Pythor P. Chumsworth is among the first of Ninjago's villains, and is the second longest standing villain that we've seen actively up until this very day, only being beaten out by Garmadon himself. And whilst Ninjago has a fantastic and extensive library of villains, to the point where most of them you could make the argument for being your favourite, Pythor has been around and has been one of the most consistent of the lot. You may have preferences, but I'm gonna be honest, I think he is the most consistent. Because since his literal beginning, he has always remained very consistent in what his end goal truly was, and how in every single appearance, he has always been the most self-serving villain we have ever seen, and I want to shed some light on that today, highlight every single time we've seen Pythor within Ninjago, and show how he has never been any different, and come to the ultimate conclusion on how he is the most consistent villain we have ever seen. Pythor's behaviour has been outlined to us literally since the beginning of Ninjago. Since his very first appearance, he has always sought after one means in terms of achieving his own goal, and that was ultimately the case of deception. When Lloyd first released him from the Anachondrite tomb, Pythor remarks at the fact that he just simply wanted a friend, and he was there to do as Lloyd wishes, and he did that for a while, ultimately understanding that he needed to get his hand on the map that Lloyd actually had, but he was waiting for the correct time to be able to do so. He was very cunning, very articulated, and knew exactly when to strike. He was gaining the trust of Lloyd as a means to try and get his hands on exactly what he wanted. It was honestly a very interesting way to go about it, and considering it was the first time we saw something like this in Ninjago, it was honestly very interesting to see. But it's not like this deception actually ended when he separated from Lloyd. Even when he ended up having complete control of the Serpentine, he was still completely deceptive on what he actually wanted to do. There were many scenes depicting Pythor absolutely detesting the Serpentine, even as far as Scales. Scales, who just simply wanted to help in his mission, Pythor just absolutely wasn't having it, and it was interesting to actually see this happen. Pythor acted like he actually knew what he was doing and he knew what his end goal was, but in reality, he had absolutely no idea what he was doing, but he needed the Serpentine to believe that he actually knew what was going to happen when the Devourer was released. But the thing is that implications actually show that Pythor never actually detailed what was truly going on, because even when the Serpentine were actually saying what Pythor believed as well, they actually called everything into question as soon as the ninja began asking. You can think of no further than the 11th episode of Season 1, where they surround the Spitter and they actually just question the logic in its entirety, and the Serpentine immediately goes into begging the ninja for help. It shows that Pythor just very clearly had his goal and he was just using the Serpentine along the way. But that 11th episode is actually a perfect example to go even further, because when you think about it as well, Pythor actually had no intention on being loyal to the Serpentine, because as soon as the ninja were getting the upper hand and Pythor realized that he wasn't losing the battle, he grabbed the Fang Blades and he went to leave. He had no intention on sticking around with his army, and he had no intention on helping. He was purely out for itself, and it was absolutely amazing to see. Of course, this culminated in the fact that he ultimately did meet his presumed demise. At the end of Season 1, he was consumed by the Devourer, and people thought this was the end of Pythor, and people thought that was going to be it for the Scaly Man. But in reality, he was not done yet, because he actually did survive that encounter, and then we get to see him again in Season 3, where in the more subtle sense we actually do get to see that Pythor is still acting how he did in Season 1. You may think that he was under the control of the Overlord, and the Overlord was truly in command, but there was actually a lot of reason to believe that it was actually Pythor that was pulling the strings. Remember that Pythor's ultimate goal was to have control over Ninjago as we see it, and the thing is that I think he honestly took advantage of the Golden Master prophecy. It seems to be that he pushed it forward because he knew that it would cause some form of control over Ninjago. Remember, all Serpentine are very much aware on what the Golden Master was meant to do, so it seems to be that Pythor knowingly pushed towards that prophecy because it would benefit him. But you may think that I'm wrong in the fact that Pythor had some level of control over the Overlord, but the thing is that he very much did. When the Overlord was just simply a virus, you will note that he was very much reliant on Pythor as a whole, and the fact that Pythor did go to get him out and get him free, it does lead to believe that the Overlord did have some form of trust in Pythor. But the thing is that even after that point in time, Pythor was completely in control of the Overlord because of his weakened state. It only took until the Overlord being the Golden Master where the Overlord actually could have had some form of control over Pythor, but in reality, he had anything but. Pythor remained in complete control of everything that was around him and using it to his own benefit even when he was the Golden Master. There are two scenes that very much prove this. The first one is when we first get to see the Overlord, and Pythor just simply states that they're doing their best and just to get rid of Borg. The Overlord listens to him completely compliantly. There is no way to believe that the Overlord was acting on his own accord because he was doing exactly as Pythor decided. And then taking it further to the second scene where the Overlord is just basically stressing over the fact that the ninja are back, and that the ninja pose a threat to him, and Pythor just simply states to attack the people, and that is exactly what the Overlord does. It seems to be that Pythor had every little bit of control over the Overlord than we truly did realise. But this idea that Pythor had control over the Overlord actually does lead to the explanation as to the only time where we actually see Pythor act for anyone other than himself. The scene where Pythor swallows the shrinking pill was always weird to me, but if you take into consideration the idea that Pythor had control over the Overlord, it makes complete sense. Pythor's goal was to take over Ninjago, like I said, but in this case his way of doing it was to just have the Golden Master simply do it. So if Pythor was to swallow the pill and continue to control the Overlord, it's basically no foul, no play. And if the Overlord truly had that much power, Pythor just simply assumed that he would be able to be re-embiggened once more. But again, this ultimately failed, and it does once more show Pythor's ultimate goal. Once he was shrunk and the Overlord couldn't do anything about it, he ran. He completely bailed on the situation and left the Overlord for himself, again showing that he was truly only for himself. But the thing is that it does show that this one moment where it seems to be that he did something for someone else is just simply Pythor once again being himself, being deceptive, and ultimately trying to get to his own benefit. And again, I absolutely love that. This brings us to Season 4, where we once again see Pythor actually doing something within the scope of Ninjago, and a lot of people see this season as him actually being good, but the thing is that it's very clear that he's not. I don't understand how people believe that Pythor was actually being good within this season, because every single time we actually heard from him, he was basically just talking about how he was going to benefit himself. Yes, he did nothing towards the ninja, and he did help them by all account, but again, it was completely self-serving. He served no benefit to be against the ninja in that moment, so he was their friend, he was their ally, just to push his own agenda once more, ultimately for two things: to re-further his own goal, and also to be at his original size again. It was all purely for self-serving purposes, and I love that about him. But the thing is that it again shows how consistent he truly was in his own actions, and this again, once more, extends into his next appearance. And this was Day That Departed, and a lot of people who believe that Pythor was good in Season 4 cite Day That Departed as going against the plot that he had going for him. But again, it is completely showing that everything that we actually saw within Day That Departed and also Season 4 was just once more for his own purposes, because again, he outright states it. He states that he helped them back then just because it made sense, but he's back to actually finish off what he was going to start, which was, well, defeat the ninja to get back up in front. The thing is that getting rid of the ninja in that moment once more made sense, because the rest of them were being taken care of and all he had to do was take out Lloyd. Again, showing that it's completely self-serving and ultimately for his own ambition. But this leads us into his final appearance, which is crystallized, and a lot of people, myself included, have cited that he does feel at least a little bit different within the season. He feels a little bit flanderized, he feels very much to be the British villain in Crystallized, but his sense of ambition and his deception is still very much there, and honestly, it feels more potent than ever. Pythor is once again going under the command of the Overlord, and he doesn't have command over the Overlord this time round, but the thing is that he is joining them for a very singular purpose. Remember, before the point of the Crystal Council, he was stuck within prison. He had no way of getting out, he was simply stuck in his own little contingent. The thing is that as soon as the Overlord presented interest in him, he actually did see a way out, and he saw a way to benefit himself. He was able to escape Cryptarium, he was able to get more power, and he was able to be on the correct side of what was going to take over Ninjago. It wasn't complete and utter control over the realm in its entirety, but it was definitely the closest thing to it. I think Pythor even recognized in this moment that this was going to be what took over the land, and I do think he recognized that at least playing a part in it would mean that he would have what was his ultimate ambition. But even beyond that, we do still see semblances of him actually being how he truly was the entire time, and the main one was his first encounter with Lloyd after they got the power. When Pythor confronts Lloyd, he actually remarks at the fact that it started out with the two of them and it made sense that it was going to end with the two of them. He completely wanted that moment to himself. He wanted to fulfill what he always wanted to do, which was defeat the ninja. If he wasn't going to get complete control, he would at least get an aspect of it. And I do really like this interaction because he is completely right. It started with the two of them and he wanted it to end with the two. And when they were interrupted by the rest of the council, he was visibly angry. And I do think that's interesting of note because in every single time we've ever seen Pythor, he only gets angry when it's something that he truly despises. Again, think of one of the first times we see him angry, when Scales just simply tries to help him up. The visceral anger in Pythor is notable and it's palpable. So we know for a fact that he only gets truly upset when something that he really doesn't want to happen does happen. And that is exactly what happens when people interrupt his confrontation with Lloyd. And that, in my opinion, shows the ultimate case when it does come to Pythor P. Chumsworth. He is ultimately a self-ambitious, a self-deluded, and completely self-serving menace, and he has always been extremely consistent in that goal. It may have changed shape and form every once in a while, and maybe the initial or the final outcome may be a little different, but he has always had that one goal in mind. Have control over Ninjago, have the ultimate power, and also defeat the ninja that defeated him prior. I do think it shows for one thing to be certain, that Pythor is the most consistent villain that we've ever seen within Ninjago. But before I do close things off, I do want to note one more thing about the character, and honestly something that I'm very happy to truly see, and that is that Pythor, whilst coming up so many times and in so many different ways and shapes, I do think it's good to note that Pythor has seemingly never really been nerfed. Of course, he's had things happen to him that's made him notably weaker, mainly when he was shrunken down, but the thing is that when Pythor is at his intended strength and at his intended level and size, the thing is that he's always remained very consistent in his abilities. He's always been the winner of most of his fights. He's always been the person who has had the ultimate ambition, and he's always been the one that's had a fighting chance. And I love that about him. It feels like he never became weaker, and it feels like he never was compromised. And I, for one, am very happy that we actually got to see that. And honestly, it is one of the more further reasons as to why I love this character. He's always remained the same, and he's always stuck around, and I hope we do get to see him down the line. And this is where I'm going to pass it off to you guys. What is your opinion on Pythor? Did you notice how he has always remained the same throughout Ninjago? And what do you hope to see of him in the future? Me personally, I hope Dragon's Rising does show him once more. It'd be cool to see, and I just hope that he's as consistent as he ever was. I hope that he's just the same snake that we've always seen, and I would love to actually have that be the case. But like I said, I would love to know what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, and I do hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people. And if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you can become a channel member and join the legends on screen. Thank you to each and every single one of you. You are all absolute legends. But like I said, that is about it for today, you guys, and thank you very much for watching. Take care. Okay,